best song on the album for me is the title track,
Yes.
which is the one that has the most Black Sabbath kind of things coming through into it. The riff. It's a tremendous riff. It's a tremendously constructed song. Dio's amazing on it. Everybody's amazing on it. Geezer, Butler, Bill Ward, Tony. It's a phenomenal song.
T-Bone, Brown Cuts, podcast on the other side. T-Bone.
Welcome to T-Bone's Prime Cuts, episode 15. Today's guest is Chris Sutton. Chris has written books on Alice Cooper in the 70s, Alice Cooper in the 80s, Sparks 1969 to 1979, Chic, AC/DC, Black Sabbath in the 70s, and the one we're going to talk about today, his most recent book, the fantastic Black Sabbath, the Dio Years. Welcome to T-Bone's Prime Cuts. Our guest today is Chris Sutton, the author of this great book, Black Sabbath, the Dio Years. Every album, every song. Chris, how are you?
How am I? That's a very good question. I've had better weeks, better months, but the good thing is I get to talk to you about a band who've been part of my life since, I suppose I was about 12, 13 years old, and I'm coming up to 65 this year, so that's a long, long time. And I'm from Birmingham, where the band was originally from as well. So yeah, I think this is going to be good. It's going to be good.
So I'd like to start with this all seems to start with the trouble they were having with Ozzy at the time. And of course, there were other things going on too. Even I only thought it might be time to end Sabbath and possibly work on a solo project. Lots of controversy over whether they should fire Ozzy. That wasn't an easy decision, was it?
No, back in the 1970s and probably the 80s and so on, I mean, bands signed to labels to produce a certain number of albums. And that's the driving force. There's not many bands in that era who reach a kind of a Rolling Stones, Beatles, Led Zeppelin level where it's like, okay, we'll do the album when we want to do it. When we can fit it in, we will do the album when it suits us. A lot of bands, and Sabbath was certainly one, who would have been concerned about delivering the album on time, getting the record company pressure. And by 1978, 79, like a lot of the bands that you love and I love, they were suffering burnout. You can run through all of these bands and see times when the burnout starts and members start to leave, they change lineups and so on. But the two members of a band that are arguably the most difficult to replace, as I'm sure you know, your lead guitar player and your singer. Most of the time, that's where you're going to get the trouble, because they're probably the two that generally stamp the identity on a band. It's probably fair to say. I think that Ozzy's importance to that point had possibly been downplayed a little bit, actually. In my opinion, I don't think his gift with melodies and his contribution to Black Sabbath had been given as much credit as perhaps it should have done at that point.
I'm a Dio fan, but I love the Ozzy stuff. I was thinking last night of all the songs I've covered over the years with bands, we've done more of the Ozzy stuff than we did the Dio stuff.
The thing with Dio was that growing up in that era, and I'd have been like 17, 18, so we were aware of Dio because of his incredible work with Ritchie Blackmore in Rainbow, and they produced Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, the phenomenal Rainbow Rising, the Long Live Rock and Roll album, the On-Stage album. And to me and people I knew, it was Blackmore's band, but Dio to us was equally as important. You could not ignore this man's presence, his great voice, his charisma, the whole night. And when he left Rainbow, it was a massive, massive shock. For the life of me, I couldn't understand it. But when you look around at who Black Sabbath could have picked to replace Ozzy, if they were going down that route, you start thinking now, you go back, you think, who would have been around? Who could they have had? And they tried Dave Walker, as you know,
Yeah.
for a very short time before the Never Say Die album. And he was like a bluesy singer prospect that didn't quite work. Dio, I think, was exactly the right person at exactly the right time. I can't think of anybody else who could have taken that band and given them the punch, the injection of verve, life, the whole thing to actually have taken them in a completely different direction. Because I don't think that it's not the Black Sabbath we knew. And the point I wanted to make here is around 79, 80, 81. If you go and look at all these classic rock bands, they all have this kind of thing of, it's become 1980, it's the end of the decade, we better either cut our hair, wear a suit, change it. You can go through ZZ Top, Yes, Alice Cooper, Black Sabbath, lots and lots of bands are all kind of like, we better do something a bit different for the 80s. And in Sabbath's case, it was enforced on them by the problems with Ozzy and that need to carry on. And they do go in a substantially different direction, I think, with the first album, Heaven and Hell, in my opinion.
Talk a little bit about the chance encounter that Iommi Dio had at the Rainbow.
It seems to me like they had about 2 or 3 near chance or slightly set up encounters. One at a party where Iommi met Dio, the party organised by Sharon Osbourne, who I think he was, Sharon Arden, as she was at the time. Sorry, he knew her very, very well indeed. And the other encounter was at Rainbow Bar and Grill, that famous place in Los Angeles. And I think Iommi at that point, by the time he met Dio, was solidly thinking of a solo album, not for the first time. This happens later on in his career as well. But he was never going to get a solo album past the record company. For the simple reason, when you look at the front of an album, it says Black Sabbath, you're going to shift more units than if it says Tony Iommi. And anybody would be the same. It's the same for almost any people of that ilk. Jimmy Page, any guitar player would know that. And Dio was also, we have to remember we'd laugh about it now, but he wasn't a youngster. He'd made his first single, I think, in 1957. That's like about 5 years before the Beatles formed. He'd been around. He must have been worried. In his own autobiography, he talks about running out of money and being a bit low on cash. The Sweets had offered him a chance to sing with them, and he could have done it. He could have done the Sweet, but it wouldn't have been at the same level he was at with Richie Blackmore. So you look at his options. His options, I think, would have been to form a solo band and get somebody to front the money for that, or B, find some band of a certain stature who needed a singer. I mean, this is serendipity, isn't it? You've got all these people, Iommi's sort of looking for a singer and sort of not, and Dio's sort of looking for a band and sort of not. And it's these kind of chance encounters that I think you need to seize in your life when they come along. And both of them did. I was going to tell you, back in Birmingham in the late 70s, your information source would have been a fanzine that you might have sent off for in the post. Melody Maker, the New Musical Express and Sounds, the weekly music papers. That's where you got all your information, really, pretty much. The local news press wouldn't have covered Black Sabbath, hardly ever. They were just one of those rock bands. There was no real interest from the press or the general public in Birmingham in Black Sabbath until, say, after the Osbourne series, at the earliest. They were just another rock band, really, till then. So when you read in the music press, which was the first we knew of it, Sabbath have sacked Ozzy and have got Ronnie James Dio, it was kind of like, oh, you hadn't got anyone to talk to about it, maybe your mates, but you couldn't really get them unless you phoned them up. You hadn't got a mobile. So there was just a real lack of information, nothing circulating around at all, until you got to the Birmingham Odeon on the Heaven and Hell tour. That's when your whole clan are gathered. And everybody's waiting to see what Dio's going to do. And, I think the least nervous person in the entire Odeon that night, which we'll come to again in a bit, I suspect, I would say was Ronnie James Dio. I have the most enormous respect for this guy. I saw Trevor Horn with Yes when they did the drama album, and he'd replaced John Anderson.
Yeah.
And he looked, as we say in England, like a rabbit in headlights. He looked utterly terrified. And he got a lot of stick. Now, Dio got a bit of stick at the Odeon, not for long, because I think there's nothing that guy couldn't do.
Just move back just a little bit.
Sure.
Put the band together, and they moved into the studio. You have lots of stories from Geezer to Craig Gruber to Jeff Nichols to Iommi, Ward, Dio, even Martin Birch. I don't want to reveal too much because people need to buy this book. But can you give us as best you can, a synopsis of what that frantic activity was?
You've got a situation in Los Angeles at first where the band, do we get rid of Ozzy? Don't we get rid of Ozzy? Is Geezer going to stay around because he got problems to deal with in England? Bill Ward's drinking. All sorts of things going on. And then you've got a procession of people coming through. Eventually Geezer goes back. Ronnie Dio rings up Craig Gruber, who'd been with him in Rainbow, and persuaded him to come and try out on bass, and he sticks around. We don't know how long he sticks around for, because there's two different versions at least of how long he sticks around for. Jeff Nichols comes over from the band Courts in England, who knew Tony Iommi, comes over to help him with the songwriting, play keyboards, plays a bit of bass. Procession of people. It's Dio who suggests they get Martin Birch in. An incredibly smart move, because the previous two Sabbath albums have been produced really almost entirely by Tony Iommi, it's probably fair to say, and both of them are flawed. If anybody out there listening to this, watching this, hasn't got the Super Deluxe edition of Technical Ecstasy, for example, please go get it, because the rough mixes, the early mixes, are miles better than the ones on the album that came out in the end. Much less produced, much less stuff going on, and they sound all the better for it. Martin Birch probably had a schoolmaster kind of approach to drilling them and getting them through. But again, we have this situation, and it's in the book in greater detail probably than most people would want, but it's truly staggering how you can produce an album as big as Heaven and Hell, following this tortuous saga of this revolving door that people are going in and out of, and who's there and who isn't, and who's doing what. And it's just incredible, absolutely incredible. And I don't think Heaven and Hell's 100% great album. I think there's at least two tracks that shouldn't really have made the cut, but the strength of the rest of it is awesomely impressive. So they did get through this tortuous recording sessions somehow, and they did put Heaven and Hell out, and I remember vividly the day that I bought it. Absolutely. I can tell you the time of day I bought it and everything I did from having bought it. And my first thought was, I thought it looked better just picking it up, and we hadn't heard anything. The radio wouldn't have played it. We had two shows that vaguely covered rock music, and they wouldn't have done it till after the album came out. So you got this album, you thought, that's a great cover. That's a real eye-catching, for the 80s kind of cover, that sort of step up, not using hypnosis anymore. Go home on the bus, about 40 minutes, 50 minutes back. Then you've got to wait. Then you've got to get the needle on and get the record player going. And the thing that struck me was that colossal force of Neon Nights.
Yeah.
That kind of, like, right, we're here, we're now, and this is... And I just took it as being Black Sabbath, to be honest, Terry. I mean, I thought, they say the Black Sabbath, they are Black Sabbath. Looking at it from a distance now, in honesty, I think they should have called themselves something different, such as the impact of Ronnie James Dio and the change in direction musically, because there's not a lot on it that makes me think, oh, that's the Black Sabbath that I've been listening to for years. There are times when I think that. But there's an awful lot of times when I think, Ronnie James Dio did not get the credit for what he did in Rainbow, because there's some solidly rainbowy kind of things going on to me at times, which suggested to me he must have had a far bigger impact on the songwriting and the melodies in the Rainbow songs than he'd been given credit for.
One thing that I've heard before, and you mentioned in the book, was that while they were recording, that Ronnie didn't need some kind of routine to warm up or prepare for singing. He just went for it.
Yeah. He did that, I think, pretty much throughout his career. He was incredible at that. There's several examples of saying, Ronnie, do you want to do a vocal? And Mike Exeter, I think, in his talks about it, and says, it's common for a singer to have to warm up or try a few passes. And the other one is, as you know about comping a vocal?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those listening who don't know, it's where you take 4 or 5 or even more run-throughs and you just patch them together to get the best version. Sometimes they'll even patch in a word from another version because they like the way that word was said differently. But Dio could just go through and nail it, and that could be the final take. He was that good a singer, and I think that's the other thing as well. Is, I mean, I think Dio is a better singer than Ozzy.
Yeah.
If you're going to look at it, my dad used to sing. And he'd listen to the people I was listening to growing up, and he'd explain to me the difference between somebody who had a good voice and somebody who was a singer.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, if you've got an interesting voice, like say a Rod Stewart, for example, or even an Ozzy Osbourne, Alice Cooper, that's great. But none of those would necessarily be classed as being a great singer. 100%. In terms of being able to do scales and range. I know that David Bowie took singing lessons, for example, around the time of just before Heroes, and you listen to him on Heroes and he's kind of warbling through the scales and holding the notes and stuff in a way that he's never really done much of in his early years. So there is a skill set there, and I think Dio had got that ability to do that. So you get him singing across songs, like the melodies, like on Neon Nights. He sings across the riff, doesn't he? He has his own melody that he puts in the song for the vocals. And Ozzy could do that at times, but he's generally associated with singing the riff, like Iron Man.
Yeah.
He's singing exactly what Tony Iommi is playing. Da, 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 da. And he's singing that. And that was the sort of thing, and I think Dio does comment on that he just didn't like about those early Sabbath songs. I think he found that a bit tricky because that's something he would never ever do.
Yeah. Now, Bill Ward was famous for his, for the swing of his playing, but it was noticeably absent from this album. Why do you think that was?
I think they fudged this a bit. I'm slightly concerned about this, but when you write a book like this, you've got to be careful at times. But, I mean, there's been a suggestion that Bill Ward doesn't play on the album at times, or all of it, or even any of it. I've seen that suggested, and that's just poo-pooed, which of course it would be anyway. Let's be honest. But I don't really hear a lot of Bill as he was on the Heaven and Hell album. There'll be some out there who say that's nonsense, but that jazzy swing that he has, I don't really hear it very much at all. Now, it could be that's just because the way the material was written and didn't allow for that. But a few years ago, Bill would have got that in somehow anyway. Vinny Appice comments on it about how Sabbath, before he joined in the early years, they would just come in at the way they would construct a song like Black Sabbath, and one would come in and one would hang back. And he said it wasn't really noted as such. It's just they just did what they did because it worked well. Whereas he's more of a structured player. He'd be looking for where the structures were in the songs, and they weren't necessarily there at times in the early songs. Where there's more of a jazzy kind of feel to it. So I like to think that Bill is on the whole album, and maybe he's just adapted his style because there's not much else for him to do. But it does surprise me that there's a lack of those. the jazzy feel that Bill does kind of get in, which is what I do like about Black Sabbath in particular. The swing that Bill gets in. I don't hear much of it at all, really, on that album, Heaven and Hell.
You mentioned that Ozzy was furious when he found out they were keeping the Sabbath name.
Yeah.
Because Bill Ward, and he believed it at the time. He thought they were going to use a different name, but I don't think that it was mainly the record company wouldn't allow that, right?
I mean, would you? I
No,
mean, no. I mean, let's be honest. You're a record company and you've spent all this money on a band and thinking, are they ever going to produce this album? You've got the shock of Ozzy being gone, which they ride through. Never seen a comment on that, by the way. We know Don Arden, the manager, was angry about it
yeah,
for the same reasons, exactly the same reasons. And they're going to be looking at Dio and thinking, well, we're going to call it Black Sabbath then. You know, we're going to, and it'll have been about salvaging something, because you see, the way it was, I would have bought the album anyway,
yeah,
right? Because I've got all the other Black Sabbath albums. I've not heard this album. I go and buy it. And that's the first time I'm going to hear it. That was the first time I heard any of it. If I don't like it, I've already bought it. And the record company would be aware of that. We'd all gone out and bought it. And I think it's certainly a better album than Never Say Die was. I would say that was a very problematic record. Technical Ecstasy, I think, is a bit underrated. But I can understand the record company's decision, to get back to your point, call it Black Sabbath. Of course they're going to call it Black Sabbath. And that makes sense to me. I understand it, but I don't think it necessarily was Black Sabbath. I think it's a different project.
You know, I was going to ask about the cover, and you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites of all the albums I've bought. That's one of my favorites.
It's I mean, they'd worked a lot with Hypnosis and other people, and Sabbath's covers I do like on the whole. One of my favourite is Sabotage, the one they hated at the time. I just love the ridiculousness of that album cover. I love it, absolutely love it. But that's a very striking image that they got from that old photograph. The ladies dressed as angels, and I think it was a carnival, a school carnival or something. And it's such a great cover, and Van Halen obviously liked it, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Now, when you get to the actual record, you give a fantastic breakdown on each song in the book, which is yet another reason to buy the book. So briefly, what were some of your favorite songs of the album?
The best song on the album for me is the title track.
Yes.
Which is the one that has the most Black Sabbath kind of things coming through into it. The riff. It's a tremendous riff. It's a tremendously constructed song. Dio's amazing on it. Everybody's amazing on it. Geezer, Butler, Bill Ward, Tony. It's a phenomenal song. I'm never quite sure of the running order on Sabbath albums. I'm not sure. You try and think where else it could go, Heaven and Hell. And I did have the idea that maybe they should have opened the album with that, but they'd gone for having a fast-paced rocker on Never Say Die, Technical Ecstasy, and Iommi, as you probably know, said, "Oh, we need one more song for the album." It amazes me when a band goes, "We need one more song," don't they know? So anyway, so now they've finished. Oh, we need another song. So they went to Paris and recorded Neon Nights, which is just a blast, an absolute 1980 blast of this is new, this is Sabbath, this is Dio on absolute one of his best ever vocals. Is Neon Nights, and he's just tremendous on it. It's just a great wham bam, thank you ma'am kind of smash of a song. Other ones you got on there that are great. Well, Children of the Sea, the first song they ever kind of worked on together, is very rainbowish, I think, to me at times on that one. Lonely is the Word. That curious bluesy one at the end is another classic, great song, I think. Die Young, the controversial Die Young, which Craig Gruber either did or didn't write.
Yeah.
No one's telling. I think there's only two songs on there that are a bit subpar, I would say. which is Walk Away, and I forget the title of the other one right now. You'll probably know. On side two, anyway. There's a couple of on side two which are
Oh, yeah.
a bit fillerish, and both Geezer and Tony have agreed on that. So it was nice to know that I share their views. But those are the two on that side that I thought weren't quite so hard. But a very, 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 very strong album. And it really ignited things for Sabbath. And I saw them on the tour at Birmingham, which was a hugely big night for the band, obviously. And there were two aspects to this. The album, you knew you're going to get some songs off the new album, absolutely fine. But the big thing I think was what Ronnie was going to do with the old songs, because we knew there had to be some old songs because they hadn't got enough songs to do a set. And I think Ronnie always found it a bit tricky doing the old Ozzy songs, I think. For example, I think he gets a little close to pantomime on Black Sabbath for me. In as much as when Ozzy does it, he's like an unreconstructed working class kind of brummie, people from Birmingham. And he kind of sounds like he means it. It sounds very real. I can believe the guy when he's singing that. With Dio, I never felt he quite necessarily got to grips with the songs from the Ozzy era as well. Maybe they just picked the wrong songs for him. He was always much happier, I think, on the songs that they'd recorded with him, the new songs, I would say.
I pretty much like the entire record with the exception of Walk Away and especially side one. As a matter of fact, we covered Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, and Heaven and Hell. And you mentioned this just a minute ago, but I had this down. I love how you mentioned that Children of the Sea is very much a Rainbow Black Sabbath mashup, because I heard this before I heard Rainbow, and Children of the Sea was one of the first ones we covered, and I just love that song, but I never put it together how closely associated they are.
I think so, and the other one, Lady Evil, as well. Could have been on a couple of Rainbow albums for me. I think so. Anyway, that's what I'm hearing. The other one, the other song I'm not so keen on is Wishing Well. I think that's a bit, okay.
If you could give us a little background on this, is going into the tour, but on Bill Ward leave the band. That's
Well, from what I've read, and it's in the book, is they thought he was having one of his Bill moments. So clearly these sort of things must have happened before. So Vinnie Appice was brought in as a stand-in, effectively, because somebody got to come. Again, we're back to money again. Without a doubt, this is money. Promoters and so on driving it. If they breach contract, they're in trouble. You can't cancel a tour. Every date that they cancel would have cost them money to some degree. So you need somebody solid to come in who can do the job. And Vinnie was the man who came in and did an absolutely amazing, fabulous job. Can you imagine the stress?
Yeah.
His kit was apparently tinier than Bill Ward's. Bill had a huge kit with cymbals and a whole tons of big gongs and stuff and whatever. But Vinnie had only got a small kit, which I think Tony commented on his first kit, which I think was Hawaii as well, saying you need a bigger kit, even if he's not going to use the full kit. It looks more impressive. But I think they were holding the door open for Bill. I think they always held the door open for Bill, to be frank. Vinnie kind of says when they come to the next album, we'll come to that. He felt, now I've got the gig. It's, because I'm going in the studio, man, But I swear to you, if Bill had turned round, and you see this actually running through Sabbath all the way through. Yeah. It's the four of them come tops. And then if you can't have Ozzy, Ronnie's tops. So poor Tony Martin is always third choice.
Yeah.
He gets the gig whenever they can't get Ronnie or Ozzy. And it's the same with drummers as well. Whenever Bill wants to come back, he comes back immediately.
Yeah.
And so does Geezer. Originally, this book wasn't going to be Sabbath and Dio. It was originally going to be, foolishly, I have to say, because I'd done Sabbath in the 70s, and it was originally going to be Sabbath in the 80s. And then the publisher and I, we had a chat and kind of looked at it, and you thought, this is going to have to be an immense book to cover what happens to Sabbath in the 80s. I mean, you've looked at it yourself. And he just thought, it's just going to be a horrendous job trying to cover what happened in that era. So Sabbath and Dio looked good. And there's 4 albums. There's 4 solid studio albums and some stuff on a compilation. And I think it made it an interesting thing to look at, how Ronnie works with Tony in particular. Because this is the other aspect you've got here is going back to Heaven and Hell. You've got Ronnie writing the lyrics, and you can tell that's Ronnie.
Yeah.
You know, the rainbows are appearing again, and so on and so forth, and it's all very kind of Hobbits and Lord of the Rings and Wizards orientated, and so on and so forth. Except for maybe Heaven and Hell, where he tries to get a bit of a social message in. I think possibly, I'm not sure. But Geezer doesn't write anything, is the point. Geezer doesn't write any of the lyrics, and he had been the lyricist predominantly. So what you've effectively got as a writing team for probably 90% of that album was Tony and Ronnie. There's nothing chipped in from Bill. There's nothing chipped in from Geezer, except maybe Neon Nights. I can't imagine he sat there and didn't have something to say. So there's that big switch going on there. But the credits say all songs by the 4 of them, Black Sabbath, and that becomes problematic, as we're going to find out, because you've got a guy, Ronnie, who's chipping in with all the words, nobody else is, and that becomes an issue.
You can help support this podcast by visiting tbpcpodcast.com/store and selecting an iconic T-Bones Prime Cuts mug. That website again is tbpcpodcast.com/store.
Going on in the tour, well, this is from that. I remember in the 90s, somebody gave me, it must have been a 25th or 30th generation VHS copy of the Black and Blue tour.
Yeah.
It looked awful, but but whoever put that together did a terrible job. I mean, I was still excited getting any footage, from that tour, but still the back and forth between the bands, the way they put it on there was just awful.
You're like me, I think, aren't you? I mean, I like things to be right, and it's just so annoying.
Yes.
Why would you do that? Why would anybody think it was a good idea to alternate the bands on the video? And for those, the video has not been officially released on DVD or Blu-ray or anything since. We think it's Tony who doesn't want it out for whatever reason. It is on YouTube. That's the good news, folks. That's your go-to. And they come over great. And they were great. I mean, they really, really were a tight, great band. The only thing you would have changed Black Sabbath live in that era, not at the time, although maybe even then, Tony's solos.
Yeah.
When I saw them at Birmingham, if you're going to go to the toilet during the set, no disrespect, but you're going to pick Tony's solo.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to miss a song. And other bands did the same. Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin. You got those long solos, particularly with Led Zeppelin. You get a half-hour John Bonham drum solo. You're going to go off and get something or do something. So I think they had it all going, and this is an interesting point. I mean, Bill Ward had his issues and had gone. You've now got a solid drummer in Vinny Appice. Geezer's back. He's sorted out his personal problems. So, and then they were now nicknamed by some of the British press. Do you know this one? They were called Geezer and the Italians.
Yeah, yeah.
You've heard
Well,
that?
I thought, well, actually, I hadn't. I saw it in the book, but that's the first time I'd heard. Yeah,
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? But they were in a very, very, very strong position, really. Okay, they would have had Bill back, but what a strong position to be in. A hugely successful, long tour, about nearly a year. Big, big album. Um, and now they're ready for the second album. The interesting point here, though, is Ozzy have been all washed up, absolute pits. Comes back with a strong album too, doesn't he?
yep, yes, he does.
So you've got both parties coming with a strong album, Tony, Geezer and Bill with theirs, and Ozzy with his, a strong album. And you kind of think to yourself, what if they'd just had time off?
Yeah,
Just time up. But there was no time off. It was like, you can't do it, right, you're out. And I'm not knocking Tony, Geezer or Bill for this. It's the record companies and the management and the promoters who dictate this kind of ridiculous work schedule.
yeah,
You go back and look at the tours for these bands back in the day. Pick any of them. So pick anyone. And then you imagine it's you doing that run of dates, like 6 months or something.
yeah,
Maybe a day off a week. I just wonder how they did. Well, I think we can probably guess how they did it.
yeah. They had a little help.
Little help.
Yeah,
Thus creating the problems that lead to them eventually having to leave the band or whatever. But they were in a strong position anyway, and they must have known they were in a strong position to record another album. Even so, the tiniest of cracks starting to appear as soon as they set foot in the studios to record that second album with Ronnie.
before we move on to Mob Rules, I know this is a little out of order from the book, but I thought this might be a good time to mention the Dio. What were Dio's three great albums? Because that's an interesting thing too.
He was asked this question, I think it was in Kerrang magazine, something like that. And he's a very good self-promoter, Ronnie, and I admire that. I mean, that's a great gift to have. But he'd been responsible for three of the greatest albums in rock and metal with three different bands.
Yep.
Holy Diver with his own band and in his own right, Heaven and Hell with Black Sabbath, and the absolutely mighty Colossal Rainbow Rising with Rainbow, which is, I think of the three, I'd pick that as his greatest achievement, because even now you put that on and you think, hey, what the hell?
Yeah,
If only they'd turned the bass up on it, is the only thing.
yeah,
But I mean, that's an amazing thing. I can't think of anybody else who can say, I've had three enormously, hugely successful albums with three different kind of lineups, musical groups. But he did, and he pointed out he was absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Then comes Mob Rules in November of 1981, and talk a little bit first of all about that cover, because I actually kind of like it, but it doesn't really, to me, it seemed like an odd choice.
Yeah, I agree with you, Terry. I mean, Greg Hildebrand did the cover, and it was from a dream he had.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was originally called Mob Dream, and he woke up in a sweat. He'd been down in South America in some hellhole place there, and he woke up. It's basically being dragged to be executed, murdered,
Wow.
and those are the skins of the previous victims that are hanging up, and they're beckoning you forward. It's you next. And that was his painting, which I think appeared in a book, a gallery, etc. And they saw it. I think it might have been Tony saw it. Somebody saw it, and they thought that'd be a good cover. I don't think it is. I think it's a great piece of art. I love it as a piece of art.
Yeah.
But I find it a little bit brown, a bit kind of flat. I like the punchiness of Heaven and Hell that kind of just grabs you.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's as grabbing as that. I've got a real feeling about this, that sometimes covers can dictate how albums are perceived. If a cover's great, it's going to hook you in. You're going to think, yeah, okay. If a cover's awful, an example, Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Love Beach is one of the most appalling covers of all time, which is them sort of bare-chested
Yeah.
with medallions on a beach, and it's hard to get past that awfulness of that cover. Although the album's not too hot either. But I just think it was a great piece of art, but not as eye-catching. I think it's a bit flat, a bit muted for a cover. Sorry, Greg.
Now, I loved reading this. Tell us about when you met Butler and Dio by accident.
Yeah. Because I worked in the centre of Birmingham in the Central Library, I could get to the Odeon, the Town Hall, anywhere for any gigs. And I discovered if you got to any gig in the afternoon, you could meet anybody at all. And most bands you could meet for autographs, a chat, and they'd be okay. Later on, when the gig started, you got no chance unless you wanted to wait till like 12 o'clock, 1 in the morning or something, and they might come out and see you. But the Holiday Inn was around the corner, and a lot of bands stopped at the Holiday Inn. And in those days, ridiculously, you could find out where a band stopped fairly easily by ringing up the hotel. But this is true. So I met Bruce Springsteen at the Holiday Inn because they told me he was stopping there. They told me when Alice Cooper was stopping there. It's true. Anyway, I'd seen UFO, and I thought I'd go along and get them to sign an album, which I hadn't got signed the night before. And I knew they'd be coming out to travel. So I thought I'll just go along and spend my lunch hour at the Holiday Inn and see if UFO come out. Well, they didn't, but out came Ronnie James Dio and Geezer Butler. And they'd been at Stafford Bingley Hall, which to you would be very close. You'd think nothing of going there. But in Britain, it's like, it's an hour and a half, maybe. It's a long way. So it was like a big cattle shed, Stafford Bingley Hall, and they hadn't played Birmingham Odeon or the Town Hall in the centre of Birmingham. They'd gone to Stafford. So they come out the elevator, really shocked, because here's a kid, a guy, waiting to get their autographs. And they're like, well, how do you know we're here? But I told them that, I wasn't actually there to meet them. This was a real bonus. The Geezer and Ronnie come out. I was there to meet UFO, and Ronnie made some remark about UFO. I can't quite remember what he said now, but he made some remark about them. But both of them were wearing these enormous fur coats, like from up here, almost down to the ankles. And I found out from Mike Exeter, the engineer, later, that Ronnie hated the cold in Britain. And it was late in the year, I remember, and it was cold. Well, not to me, but to him. But they were both very, very gracious, really lovely. And it's true. I mean, Ronnie was just quite happy to chat. I mean, he could have gone off and got in a car or whatever he was doing, but somebody who was interested was speaking to him about his music and his art and so on. And so he would take the time. And he did make you feel very, very special. Really, really did. And I think Geezer was the one he got on best with in the band for the longest period. So I never saw Tony or Jeff Nichols or Vinny Appice. It was just those two that came out. It was really nice. It's the only time I ever met Dio, and he was as nice as everybody tells you that he is.
Yeah, I've known a handful of people that met him, and they just go on and on about him. And well, one guy that I'll talk about later that you mentioned in your book, he met him a couple times and was surprised that what everybody said was true, that he actually remembered his name and everything.
Yeah, I can believe that. I don't know how he does it. He had a kind of what I would call like a benign, quiet intensity.
Yeah.
Very pleasant, smiled at you, looked at you, but inside his head, he would. I'm sure he would remember having met you before. I don't think I've known a few people like that, musicians who've had that ability.
Yeah,
only a few. But a truly wonderful guy, an enormously talented guy. It's a shame that he does leave, as you know, and then, well, of course, he gets to come back again and then go and then come back again. But we'll probably come on to that. But we got the Mob Rules, which I think it's a bit Heaven and Hell Part 2. I think it's constructed a bit like Heaven and Hell, isn't it? I don't think the first song on it is the best. Turn Up the Night. I think that's a bit of a wannabe Neon Nights. I don't think it's as good, but I think there's some immensely strong songs on Mob Rules that make it for me as good as Heaven and Hell. Probably.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you again. What do you think are the standout tracks for Mob Rules? So this will go right, plugs right into what you're saying.
Well, the Mob Rules itself
Yeah.
is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal song. It's probably, I think, one of the very best songs I think that that they did. I mean, it's wow, just wow. And there's two versions of it. There's the one from the heavy metal film,
Right.
which is different. Different backing track, I think, different vocal as well. And I think that's a better version, possibly. But it's just got such a ferocious punch and dynamics to it. Extremely exciting track, Mob Rules, very much so. The then you got like for me, Sign of the Southern Cross. I spend a lot of the book going on about Sign of the Southern Cross. It seems to me on the live albums. A phenomenal track, great riff on the chorus and so on. Great setup on the big intro with Dio. Wonderful track. I like Voodoo very much. I like the riff on that. I think that's another great song as well. Those would be my big three. I think Mob Rules, Voodoo, Sign of the Southern Cross would be the biggies. I think that there's good stuff amongst the others as well. I quite like Country Girl quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I know they thought the lyrics were a bit odd.
Yeah.
Tony and Geezer. Why is he singing about a country girl? But I think it's a really good track. A really, really good track indeed. And I think it was a very strong album. I think another quality piece of work. So, yeah, absolutely.
No, it wasn't for a long time, but here, maybe the last 6 or 8 years, Falling Off the Edge of the World has become my personal favorite.
Yeah, I forgot that one. Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's probably one that's it's a bit understated, perhaps. Really, it's one I think that grows on you.
Yeah.
I think is what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. But wasn't one that instantly struck me, but it is one that's definitely grown as well. Yeah, so stick that in
Exactly.
as well as another. You're right. On the Edge of the World is a great song.
So we're going on to the live album here. There were shows on that tour that made up the next album, Live
Yeah.
Evil. They put that out in January of '83, but before it was released, what on earth happened during the mixing of that album?
Well, oh my God. I think by then there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff I think going on that. I think one is the band's relationship had broken down a bit. We know that Ronnie had asked for 50% of the royalty of the for the songwriting on the Mob Rules album, because he was saying, "Look, I've written all the lyrics. That's 50% of the song." He didn't get his 50%, so he stuck on the 25%. Or was he stuck on 25%? Was Vinny Appice even a member of the band?
No.
I would be surprised if he was. I would imagine possibly, maybe, and I don't know, maybe they paid him a wage. So he wasn't a full member. That's traditionally what often happens when you get replacements in bands at certain levels. Anyway, by the time they reached the studio to mix the live album, the story is that Dio and Appice were turning up on time and working with the engineer Lee DiCarlo to mix the album and everything. And then Butler and Iommi were coming in later to find out that things had changed from when they were there the night before, when they were changing the controls and the faders down on some instruments and up again. Then they would change again the following morning. And the engineer's having a bit of a nervous breakdown about this. And in the end, Dio gets sacked, or he leaves, or both, before the release of the album. And then you see the credits on the album. He's called Ronnie Dio instead of Ronnie James Dio. And so on, So there's a bit of disrespect going on. Great cover for the album, absolutely phenomenal cover, I think, of all these kind of characters from the songs that are portrayed across the sleeve. Very, very good sleeve. And the album itself is lacking. It's good. It's good. But what Wayne Davis does on that remix on the Super Deluxe edition literally nearly made me fall off this chair. I actually did, honestly, nearly fall off a chair. I was like, what the hell has happened here? He just turned this album into this like roaring masterpiece that it hadn't been before. And online fans were saying, oh, he's used different versions. He's done this. It's not the same. And he assured me, like I'm looking at you now, and said,
Yeah.
I have not used anything different. I just did the job properly.
Yeah. That I had that down here. I was going to say I agree with you 100% that that's easily the go-to version.
Yeah, it is. It is. And anyone who hasn't heard it, for some reason, I knew some people who hadn't because they just thought it'd be Live Evil again. It really isn't. You sit there going, is this what I've heard
Yeah.
before? Incredible. One of the best remixes, remastering I've ever heard.
Back to the original Live Evil album, though, I have to ask you about it. The credits that you could tell there was some anger going on there.
Oh, yeah, it's just the kind of spiteful thing that you do at school, isn't it?
Yeah.
Vinny Appice is just like a guest appearance, like a noted down as just being the drummer on it, in Dio's noted as Ronnie Dio vocals. So it is spiteful. It's a shame, but there it is.
After all this went down, Ronnie and Vinny left to create the Dio band, along with Jimmy Bain and Vivian Campbell.
Yeah.
Now, before we go on, I should state that Dio is my all-time favorite vocalist. And I saw him 9 times, 5 with Dio, twice with Black Sabbath, and twice with Heaven and Hell. And Tony Iommi was, in a way, responsible for me switching from bass to guitar. So they play a big part in my musical history.
Yep. I can get that. And I think it's interesting you're talking about Dio, but once he starts touring the Holy Diver album, if anybody was ever in any doubt, you got that great album. And look what he gets to pick from for his set list.
Yeah.
He's got stuff off Mob Rules. He's got stuff off Heaven and Hell. He's got stuff off Rainbow Rising, Long Live Rock and Roll. I remember seeing him on that tour, the Holy Diver tour. And you thought, my God, this guy's just, he could be like a superstar of the rock metal world. He's got this incredible bodywork. Already he's only on his first solo album. And he was smart enough to get Jimmy Bain back, who should never have been kicked out of Rainbow. And he got the hotshot young guitar player who'd been in Sweet Savage, an Irish band, Viv Campbell. And Ronnie was really, really hot in his solo career in Britain. I'm not, in America maybe as well, I'm not sure there. But he had a good few years of being a really hot act, and his albums were selling as well, actually better than Black Sabbath following the crash that comes, because the wheels really come off for Black Sabbath following Dio going. They did. You probably know they did Live Aid with Ozzy and Bill, and they must have asked Ozzy to come back. I know Bill certainly would have. We know this.
Yeah.
But Ozzy didn't, because his solo career was going well and had taken off. And that leaves Iommi completely stuck, which is now you get people like Glenn Hughes coming in for an album and tour on vocals, and then eventually Tony Martin comes in and steadies the Black Sabbath ship. But it's not really Black Sabbath, is it? It just isn't.
I was going to say, in the meantime, I saw Sabbath 2 more times, and one time was with Glenn Hughes. It was one of the last shows.
Saw it? Wow.
I was in Detroit, and it was either the next to the last or maybe 2 more that he was still with the band. And that night, we had tickets in the nosebleed section, and they sent us in the wrong door because they were checking everybody, for drugs and whatever else. And we ended up on the main floor, and we weaseled our way through, and I spent the night 6 feet in front of Tony Iommi, which at that time I didn't know what side of the stage you played on, so it was just dumb luck that we ended up right there. I write about that, a little recollection about that. I'll put it in the show notes because it's kind of funny. And the other time my song was with Tony Martin, and
Mm.
I always liked Tony Martin, and
Yeah.
that's the guy that I felt that he was a good singer in handling both the Ozzy stuff and the Dio stuff. It was kind of in between. Yeah, I mean, he was closer to Dio, of course, but
Yes, a good point. I think so. I think he did really, really well. The trouble is I guess, is if they'd said to you or me, you can have this, or you can have them with Dio or Ozzy.
yeah,
We're going to pick Dio or Ozzy, aren't we?
yeah,
And it's a fact, really, that they get back together with Ozzy or Dio when things have gone a bit
yeah,
downhill.
yeah.
Um, there's no easy way to put that, but there's probably record company pressure as well in there. Definitely, and Tony gets that the solo album Seventh Star with Glenn Hughes on. At least that's what he thought he was making, and it becomes Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. You can imagine the conversation, can't
Oh
you? There,
yeah.
Tony. No, don't worry, Tony. We hear what you're saying. We know it's your solo album, but you've got to Sabbath. And somebody would have piped up, gone, "What about if we called it Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi, Tony? Would that? Would you be happy with that?" Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Because he's won a bit of a victory or something, I guess.
Yeah,
But and don't get me wrong, there's some marvelous material through
yeah,
those years. The Shining, with Tony Martin, that track alone, I love The Shining, and I think he's got a terrific voice. I really do. Tony Martin, I think he's really, really good. Um,
oh,
but, but
I always like that "Hard Life to Love" too.
yeah. There are some really, really great songs in the whole era with Tony, without a doubt. I don't necessarily think it's Black Sabbath
Yeah,
at all, really. Moments, perhaps, that are a bit similar. But I mean, they basically bump along with diminishing returns. In the UK, they start to not sell out venues. Tours become shorter. Um, More people come and go. And it gets very tricky. And I guess things got a bit tricky as well for must have got a bit tricky as well for Dio, I would imagine,
yeah,
because he never would have said yes if he hadn't needed to. I wouldn't have thought.
yeah. He really started going down the hill with that. What was that "Lock Up the Wolves" or
Yeah,
the '89?
it's hard to understand, isn't it, when you look back and you look at the albums? I'm not sure. Do you have a handle on what was going wrong for him?
Not exactly. No.
No, it's as though something goes wrong for him because, yeah, definitely the quality seems to go down, I would say. And it puts him in an interesting position when Iommi's looking to carry on with Sabbath, and a proposition is put to him about working, which comes from Geezer having met. And I find that an interesting thing. I mean, that seems a little bit odd to me. I'm a suspicious person, you see.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, imagine my surprise. I took my then stepson to see Wayne's World, and this was in early '92, and then on the way home, I bought the soundtrack, and I'm looking at it, and I was like, oh, knocked
Yeah.
out. I had no clue that they had got back together. This was all pre-internet, and totally shocked but happy that they were back with Dio.
Yeah.
And I was going to say about the Butler and Dio meetup and how important were their wives and all that.
Well, I think if you look at it, let's look at it another way. You could say, for example, yeah, life's too short, let bygones be bygones. You did some great work together. So maybe you could just do some great work together again. Time's passed, and that's fair enough. So, yeah, give him some credit here. Maybe that's all it is. I just don't see what Geezer Butler was actually doing himself,
No.
really. at that point. We know that Dio was maybe not struggling isn't the word. There is a word. What's the word we can use here?
Well, I think that's a pretty apt description.
Okay, or he's open to opportunities,
Yeah.
and he would have weighed it up and thought, okay, I could work with Geezer because he all like Geezer. I think the big question, and you can actually see this coming a mile off, is can Ronnie work with Tony? And because Geezer's going back to say, oh, I've had a chat with Ronnie. They could have found each other, couldn't they?
Yeah. No.
So you get this, and then you get this absolutely curious decision, which is interesting. And we're talking about the road to Dehumanizer, which is the album that we're coming to next, isn't it?
Yeah.
The curious decision about the drummer.
That was my next question.
What is that about?
I knew about Cozy being involved before the horseback riding incident, but I just can't help but feel a little sorry for Vinnie. I mean, even Dio pushed for Simon Wright before they settled on Vinnie.
I mean, Simon Wright's a good drummer.
He is.
Let's say that. He's played with AC/DC, and let's say that. But no.
Yeah.
No. And this is the interest, because we've talked about this pecking order. If you can't have Ozzy, you have Ronnie, which seems to be the case. And then you've got Tony, but if you can get Ronnie, you'll have him back. And this is what's happening here. So Tony Martin is out because Ronnie is back. And because Cozy Powell was in this kind of lineup of Sabbath still with Tony, on the bass was Neil Murray, who'd been around for a while with Tony. And Neil Murray's a very pragmatic person. He's basically saying, Tony, if you can get Geezer back, get him back. What a man. What an absolute legend he is. He's basically saying, I'll give up my gig because you can get Geezer back, and Geezer should be the bass player in Black Sabbath. And he's absolutely dead right. Geezer should be. So Geezer's back easily. Cozy Powell's going to take some shifting. I think, and I don't mean this as a criticism, I think that Tony, Iommi and Geezer Butler are definitely people who like a bit of a quiet life on the whole.
Yeah.
I don't think they like confrontation. There's a lot of evidence to support that in the book. It's not a criticism. I wouldn't like to be the person to tell Cozy Powell that he's not going to be in the new Black Sabbath lineup because we're getting Vinnie back. Maybe if Bill had been coming back, that he might have gone for that. But he seems like a volatile sort of chap to me from what I hear, Cozy Powell. He's a good drummer. He's a great drummer.
Oh, yeah.
So, and he'd been in Rainbow with Ronnie, and what could go wrong with that? What could go wrong with that? Well, apparently Ronnie and Cozy never got on.
Yeah.
Apparently. So that would have been a big clue, won't it? So again, we get back to this stage with Dehumanizer, where we got this four-piece of Tony, Geezer from the original Sabbath, with Ronnie having come back, and Cozy Powell, and it gets off to a bad start, really. There's some demos which are on YouTube and some recordings of them in the studio and trying things, and it sounds quite promising. It sounds good, and they've had a word with Ronnie about his lyrics. He's still going to keep writing the lyrics, but they want to get it back to that kind of commentary that Geezer had done on the early Sabbath albums, where they talked about the Vietnam War and various other issues and situations that were going on in the world. So they didn't want any wizards, demons, rainbows. They wanted comment on what was wrong with the world in 1991.
That's...
And he does that.
What's funny is, I was going to ask, I saw that tour twice and listened to the CD countless times, but it never occurred to me that this album didn't contain Dio's normal mystical type, lyrics. I just took it for what it was. I never really thought about it until reading the book. And apparently Iommi and Butler were behind all that, like you said.
I think it's a bit of this thing again, and we'd had this from going into the 70s into the 80s of bands going, oh my God. And certainly we had it from the 80s going into the 90s again. particularly with grunge coming in and the whole sound from Seattle and so on. And that kind of suited an idea which I think they must have had. And at times it does sound to me a bit like, what would Black Sabbath have sounded like if Ronnie James Dio had joined them years earlier? So you do get some more of that traditional Sabbath sound.
Yeah.
Circa Master of Reality, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. You hear more of that kind of feel coming through with a 90s sheen to it.
Yeah.
It's harder, tougher than anything on the Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules album had been. This is very kind of in your face to the point where you feel like the drums are in the same room as you are.
Yeah.
You're going to know. It's headache stuff. Is Dehumanizer a great? The cover?
Yeah.
I don't think I hate it. I don't think I like it.
It's another head scratcher.
What is a Dehumanizer?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't think I care.
Yeah.
I don't think I care. I think it's a cartoon cover, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think there's going to be people out there going to go, "What are you talking about? It's fabulous." Great. I'm glad you like it. But I felt it made them look a bit less important to me. I felt it cheapened them a bit. Probably a great piece of artwork, but I had these guys on pedestals like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black.
Yeah.
They're right up there. And when anything falls below that, I feel a bit disappointed.
Yeah.
So I was disappointed. There we go. There's my confession.
Supporting TBPC podcast gives you interesting inside views from the talk space where music and musicians matter. Go to tbpcpodcast.com and click the PayPal button. All contributions are much appreciated.
I agree with you that the mix is a bit harsh, but live, fantastic.
Yeah.
Which songs from the album were your favorites?
By a very, very, very long way, and one of my favourite songs in the whole Sabbath Dio era is I.
Yes.
Oh my God, Ronnie James Dio. When he just kind of really owns a song, and it's almost like I know there's music going on. I can hear it, and I can hear that chattering riff from Iommi that's great. I can hear all this, but Ronnie's just like grabbing you by the throat.
Yes.
It's just awesome when he does that. It's just absolutely awesome. And I'm not happy with the running order on this album. Why is it stuck there? It's can we check this? But it's like right at the end of the album, I think, but not the end of the album. It's last but one or something like that. It's a daft place to put it, because it's just a great song, and I think it should have been further up the running order than that. It's not an opening track.
You probably can't see it, but I've got it written down right here. I is one of my very favorite Sabbath tunes.
It's just, I'll tell you what's great about it. It's a great song in your head within about a minute of it, maybe 20 seconds.
Yeah.
That build up, and he just plays that slow riff, and you think, oh God, they're going to unleash something on me here that's going to absolutely knock me out. I know there's something coming here. Sign of the Southern Cross did that as well, similar in that way. They're going to steamroller you with something, and they do with that, and you can't resist it. It's absolutely fantastic. And there are other great songs on the album. I think my only problem with the album, apart from the cover, okay, I've talked about enough. Sorry, Will Reese, who did the cover. The production is a bit harsh and brittle for me. Now, I've heard, and I can't say where I've heard this from, but I've heard that there is a remix on the way of that album.
Really?
Yeah. Will probably displease some people, but I know that it is going to come as one of these deluxe jobs.
Uh, moving on, what happened when Ozzy announced he was retiring and wanted this version of Sabbath to open for him on the last two dates?
It's just truly, truly extraordinary. I'm just going to say I'm adding Computer God, TV Crimes, After All the Dead,
After All the Dead. Wow.
Time Machine. So about half the album, that one, I think is really great. So you've got them on tour with what I think is a very credible album, great material. And then Ozzy retires. Now, back in the day, kiddies who were watching this, we took this very seriously because these people were, well, they weren't old at all, in fact.
Yeah.
Really.
We thought so at the time. Yeah.
We did at the time. We could understand this. And he's retiring. And he wants to finish off his live life with his old mates. Bill, he'll come. Definitely we know Bill will come. Tony and Geezer. Now, the big question here is this is, okay, they want to go and play with him and do a few songs. Yeah, okay, probably. But there's another motive, isn't there? There simply has to be another motive. And Dio is not an idiot. We know this. He's a wise man. He knows. I think if he was here, he would tell us he must have known if there was a sniff of a chance of getting back together with Ozzy, they would take it and run off and do it. He knew that. Why else would you do it? Why else would you do it? And he thought, and again he thought, well, I'm not going to support the guy who I replaced in the band. And I think he's absolutely right. Would you? Yeah. Would any of us?
Nope.
No, he wouldn't. It's cheap. And so he, to his immense credit, said, yeah, fine, okay, I'll do every date up until the ones that you're going to do. Costa Mesa with supporting Ozzy. And I'm not going to do those dates. And then let's look at it this way. There must have been some sort of contract or some sort of agreement or something. There must have been some financial implications for him. But no, I'm not doing it. Bye. Vinnie does it. Well, he would really. I can understand that. And then we get this interesting little development of Rob Halford coming out and doing it. And it's very interesting. He covered for them, I think he did about 3 gigs, 2 Costa Mesa, and he did, I think, 1 later on where he had to cover for Ozzy when Ozzy was doing the reunion with Sabbath and couldn't do one of the gigs, and that's on YouTube. And I love Rob Halford. I really, really do. I think he's absolutely terrific. And they would have asked him, I think, once they couldn't get together with Ozzy, and he's like, out the one door's gone, Ozzy. Okay, I'm not going to get back to get. Okay, fine. Meanwhile, Dio's gone out the other door, and he's like, oh Christ, here we go again. They must have asked Rob Halford. Must have asked him. Meanwhile, waiting back in the West Midlands area of Britain, we've got Tony Martin, who now comes back because he's the perennial third choice. Sorry, Tony. And fair play to him for doing that. The patience of some of these people is truly extraordinary, I think. Really extraordinary. I never got to see Sabbath with Ozzy in the original run. So I was literally spending all these years watching these near reunions and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we finally got them. And some of the best gigs I've been to in my life were the reunions with Bill and Ozzy. One of my most outstanding gig memories. 2 of them actually were with Bill and Ozzy, 2 very different gigs. Wonderful, wonderful performances. But... and again, we see this going on, don't we? He's when Ozzy's not available and there's an impetus there. Ronnie seems to come back through the door again, as he does. It's incredible, really incredible.
Cut to 2006, and the record company was going to release a compilation of Black Sabbath, the Dio Years. No one released material was available, but another option was on the table. What happened then?
Well, yes. So you've got a compilation to put out, which is fundamentally based on 3 albums. Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, Dehumanizer, and that's doable for a single CD. And somewhere down the line, somebody does that. Well, what if could you guys do a new song, and one new song turns into 3 new songs, a slow one, a medium tempo one, and a fast one. And originally, originally Bill had come back for these, and then it hadn't worked out. So for whatever reason, so Bill had gone before he'd even really arrived properly. And we get Shadow of the Wind, which is the slow one of the 3, which is, it's a really good song. It's a really good song. Ear in the Wool, which is the up-tempo one of those peculiar lyrics from Dio. A guy who's got an eye in the wall and his ears in the wall so he can see and hear, but he's stuck inside a wall, which is very Ronnie. And then we got Shadow of the Wind, and The Devil Cried was it one as well, which is a good song. So three good songs, which I think what he did do was to show them they still had something. And what they definitely had, viewers and listeners, is they had a good option, you see. So at the time that they did this, Iommi hasn't really got an option, and Butler hasn't got an option if they're not doing something with Ozzy. And Dio again decides that, well, maybe time has dissipated, time has gone by since the last falling out. And he decides to give it another go with Tony Geezer. And the hope, of course, is that as we're being maturer in years, they'll have learned more lessons since the last time. It's very zen, this, isn't it? And so they're going to give it another shot. And while they're kind of working on their next project, we get 2 little mini spin-offs. We get them on the album by Girls School, and they do a song called I Spy. Have you heard that?
Yes, I have.
It's on their Legacy album, and that's good. And then one thing that we do in my household every Christmas is we play God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen from the compilation We Wish You a Metal Christmas. Now, that song I'd always felt had a bit of a kind of a certain portent about it, a bit of doom, it's God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, but I'm picking up some sort of feel in the melody. Yeah. And Dio certainly identifies that feel, because him and Tony, Rudy Sarzo on bass and Simon Wright on drums, if there's anyone out there who hasn't heard Ronnie James Dio singing God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, make this a July or August whenever you hear this to remember, and just listen to this, because it's an extraordinary performance of it.
When I was on the radio every year for the Christmas show, I played that song, along with Merry to Christmas. That song always got emails and calls about that song from different people that hadn't heard it before. It was great.
I listen to it and I kind of laugh.
Yeah.
But it's just done so well. And I'll play it to people, and I don't tell them who it is. But maybe you've done this. And they're like, who is that? What is that? But he literally just he gets every nuance and everything he can out of the lyrics and delivers it. And it's extraordinary. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Ronnie James Dio. What a man.
So they end up going on tour, and they changed the name of the band to Heaven and Hell. And
at last,
I always felt that freed up Ronnie, as he no longer had to sing the Ozzy era songs. And
I don't have any doubts yet.
And I thought it was a positive.
Oh,
I know a lot of people got mad at the time about the reason why they couldn't use Black Sabbath, and there were people didn't know exactly what was going on, and who got blamed. Well, we won't mention her, but that didn't really have anything to do with it, as far as I know.
It was probably lurking and simmering in the background, but it must have been. But this suited them. I mean, this is the right way
Yeah,
to do
yeah,
things. It was the right thing to do, and they're not doing any of the old Ozzy songs, era songs, which was also right. They got an enormous catalogue there. That they got 3 albums
yeah,
and 3 songs off the compilation that we just mentioned, so they can easily put together a strong, very strong and solid set, which they did.
yes,
And there's a general. If you watch the video from the tour live from Radio City Music Hall, which came out on DVD, Blu-ray, and CD from all good retailers, if anyone hasn't got it, they look very happy. They look comfortable together, and I think apparently they were very happy and very comfortable.
was that the show that was early in the tour?
Yeah, it was.
It's amazing because they sound so good that early in the tour.
Yeah, they do. They drop the keys a bit, which is
Yeah,
what they do as you get older,
right.
and I get that, and that's fine. Um, I think, as you mentioned, I think you did the Dehumanizer songs all sound the better for being on this album.
Yeah,
A bit more warmth, maybe, in the textures and the feel of it. So that's one which works extremely well, and that's a really good live album. And the tour was good. You saw them on this tour,
yeah,
and so when you come to the end of the tour, and they're all thinking, "What do we do? What do we do next? Or do we do anything next? Or is that what that was? Have we just done a tour to promote a compilation album and celebrate what we've got?" But again, looking at your options, what's their best options? Carry on with it. And there's no Ozzy and no Bill at this point.
yeah,
So they decide to do a studio album, The Devil You Know. And Mike Exeter, who engineered that album and was on it playing keyboards, he could talk for hours about what a fantastic environment it was.
Let me just stop for a second. That was very interesting, including all the conversations with him. That just all kind of stuff that I didn't know. I just thought it was great.
Yeah, Mike had a ton of stuff. It didn't all make it in either. There was some things I had to leave out,
Yeah,
and you do this. You're always kind of aware. If he says something, say about Tony or Geezer or whatever, and it could be a little bit awkward, not in a bad way. I would tend to cut it out because you don't want to cause anybody any embarrassment. And nothing bad. There was nothing bad at all. But occasionally you hear things and think, oh, I don't think he's going to want to see that in print necessarily. But it happened personally. They got on extremely well. And again, it's apparent just how easy Ronnie is to record, to do those vocals. On The Devil You Know, the biggest track is and he got to number 8 in America, The Devil You Know, which is
yeah,
incredibly wow, Bible Black is
huge.
I mean what Mike Exeter was saying, that's the guy's original demo
Wow.
that you're listening to is the first pass that Ronnie done. Extraordinary. And again, it's pretty much what you get from bands at this time of their life. You get maybe 1 or 2 excellent songs, some very good songs, and songs that say are listenable. I don't mean that to sound awful, but there's nothing on there that I couldn't listen to.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's pretty high bar for a band at that time of its existence. And Dio's clearly having the time of his life, working with Tony again.
You know, I was struck by how you described how Tony and Ronnie went out of their way to be accommodating to each other during the recording of the album. and just were plain nice. I mean, do you chalk that up to maturity?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Um, and I wouldn't say it's from personal experience, but I mean, I'm 65 this year. Things do become different for you. You have a different way of looking at things as you're
Yes.
older in each decade. I know you probably would say that, but you've got to remember these guys started doing this like in their 20s and stuff and whatever, and they got together in their 30s, 40s. That's a long time. You've got life partners and wives involved and
Yeah.
families involved and all these other pressures. And I think it's nice that they didn't fall out again.
Yeah.
It's tragic with Ronnie, but at least they hadn't fallen out, and there would have been another album. That seems
Yeah.
certain, absolutely certain.
They had the that tour from April to August of 2009. I saw the one of the last shows was in Detroit. I had moved out of Detroit by then, but they weren't coming to where I lived, so I got somebody to get tickets, and it was maybe the fourth or fifth to the last show was in Detroit. So I
What
got
did you think?
I was just every time I could see anytime I could see Dio and Iommi. I mean, of course, Geezer means a lot, and by the way, Geezer's name is Terrence, spelled just like mine. And so I've always liked that too. But anytime I could see Dio and Tony on the same stage, I was just out of my mind. I mean, I was, of
The,
course, I was older, so I never was a pit type person anyway. But I mean, I enjoyed it as much as I could, to put it that way.
yeah, I'll get you. And a lot of smiling, isn't there? I mean, we have the 30 years of Heaven and Hell
Yeah,
live at Wacken Festival. And again, you can see that the appreciation, the love they've got for each other is there. And Dio looks very, very relaxed, which is surprising given the fact that he's already in the grip of cancer to a
yeah,
massive degree. Those shows must have been extremely difficult, even including what you saw in Detroit.
yeah,
He would have been very, very ill man.
yeah.
Um,
The it became public in November of 2009. So yeah, in August I had to be in terrible shape. I know that was it Geezer it said that before going on stage, sometimes he'd be doubled over in pain
yeah,
from his stomach. That
yeah,
was awful how they didn't even check for cancer. They checked all that other stuff.
yeah. That's quite surprising, really, isn't it? One of the things that we maybe kind of think about in America with the healthcare, which you'd
Yeah,
expect that people that he would have been straight off to see somebody about it, but it seems like he didn't. I think he was using like antacid tablets, whole packs of those, and knocking them back to cope with the reflux and the acid that he got going on and whatever, and so on and so forth. Um, Again, it's a shame, isn't it? I mean, if they could have just pulled the tour and allowed him to get treatment, I think he was probably in denial.
yeah,
I would imagine. I've read stuff before about Dio not being a good eater.
yeah,
There's this story, I think, where he starts eating vegetables and greens after he's been diagnosed with cancer and telling Geezer, I think it was, I wish, this stuff's good. I should have been eating this years ago. So I think
yeah.
the implication is he'd never had a particularly good diet for whatever reason. Some people don't. Some people just, that's what they choose to do.
And I was what got to me too in the book was when Geezer was describing that and being doubled over and paying all that, the fact that he never canceled a single date
No,
is
I double checked that and I can't find any evidence that he ever did, ever pull a show, as far as I know.
that's crazy.
Um, Absolutely amazing guy. And it is a tragedy we didn't get another album. We got the live album, 30 Years of Heaven and Hell, which is the Wacken one, which is is terrific. Although I do find it a bit of a hard watch because you know that the guy is seriously ill.
Yes. So they announced the cancer in November 2009. He passed away in May of 2010. So not a very long time after that was announced.
No, which says it all, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Really, it really does. I don't know if there's any more material. I asked Mike Exeter if there was anything else, and I think there is some stuff lurking around. But then they've just put out The Devil You Know and the live albums as a box, and there's nothing been added to that. So maybe there isn't anything left over they want to use. But the man's got an astonishing legacy, and I think what he did with Tony and Geezer, Bill, Vinnie, I think it's a massive achievement in the world of rock and metal. It deserves all the credit that we can give it. I mean, it's hard for me because I kind of grew up with the Ozzy, Bill, Tony, Geezer, Black. To me, that's Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Looking back now, at the time I went along for the ride with, okay, change your vocalist, change your drummer. You did. That's what you did when you were young. Looking back, I think that they should have just drawn a line under it and changed. To call themselves Heaven and Hell or whatever they were going to call themselves when Ozzy had gone, I think would have been the proper way to do it. But I understand that they couldn't. But we got some great music. We got the Dio solo albums. And let's not forget, he got those solo albums because of the contract that he'd signed to work with Tony and Sutton in Black Sabbath. That allowed him to get that deal. Which again was, I think we didn't mention this earlier, but I think was another lurking, simmering piece of discontent.
Yeah.
I
you mentioned that Iommi wasn't happy about that.
No.
Now, the way I understand it, he was just going to do a Dio and Friends type record or whatever, a side project, but
yeah, the guy from Kansas, he did a couple of songs. We've got, is it Kerry Livgren?
I remember. I've heard their songs,
and they're good songs. And I think he would have certainly have appeared. And you could see Dio doing that, but do you know the thing is, I can't see him just putting out a solo album that just kind of did something a bit over there, and we go, "Oh, that's a nice album. What a good album." I think he was hungrier and more ambitious than that. I think, and that's not a criticism. I think that's his strength. I can't see him having put out something that'll be, "Oh, that's okay, that's good. I'm glad people like it."
I'll tell you something. It's kind of funny. I hadn't heard Dio yet, and this was sometime in '83. After the album came out, and my friend who's from Kentucky, he didn't have the case, and he said, "Hey man, you got to listen to this guy." And all I heard was Ronnie James something, so I figured it was some kind of country thing. And I remember putting it in here and stand up and shout. I was like, "Oh my God!" I became a fan immediately.
We know we had Holy Diver ready for the next Sabbath album.
Yeah, I didn't know that until reading your book.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell, can't you?
Yeah. After I read it, I was like, "Well, that makes sense." Yeah.
You can really tell. That would have been like the because it's got that sign of the Southern Cross thing. It's a thing that they use. I love that trick. The slow, brooding, kind of moody intro.
Yeah.
And then, oomph. Oh, terrific! Absolutely terrific. I do miss him. I do miss Ronnie James Dio.
Absolutely.
But I think it's a lot I can understand why I know people who prefer the Ronnie Sabbath to the Ozzy Sabbath. I do.
I think it has a lot to do with when I first started listening too.
Yeah,
I've been listening in the '70s. It might be different. Now, of course, the first Black Sabbath album I ever bought was Born Again. So don't figure anything out from that.
There's some great material on Born Again.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's times on that you think, wow. And again, I've heard that there's a remix coming of that as well. And
Yeah,
thank God
I've
for that.
been waiting for that. And well, this is off subject, but Ian Gillan did a fantastic job of singing the song Black Sabbath. He just nailed it. I mean, not as good as Ozzy, but I mean, he really got into that song, which is kind of funny because a lot of those songs he had to have the words written down on paper, down on his at his feet.
It's an interesting song, Black Sabbath, because if you listen to it and just clear your head, it's the Ozzy instinctively knows when to come in, doesn't he?
Yeah,
It's not it's not formal. You got Bill sort of patching and playing away and stuff,
yeah,
and it just kind of works. And that's something Vinny Appice commented on. Was it's like, oh, I'll come in when it's right, and I'll do this next line, I'll do this next bit when it's right. A very clever man, Ozzy Osbourne. Never quite sure if they heard each other's albums. I don't know if he ever listened to Heaven and Hell Mob Rules. I suspect he never did. I would imagine, and he probably wouldn't have liked it. But did they listen to Blizzard of Oz and so on? I don't know.
right.
And we had this big thing with him passing away, and we've had the first anniversary in Birmingham. I don't live in Birmingham anymore, but I go there every week, several times. And it's nice how Birmingham has adopted Sabbath now, but
Yeah,
it's only been in the last few years. It really, really has. And I know we've got hopefully we've got Tony's, is it second or third solo album? I suppose second in his
yeah.
own name completely. Coming out this year, apparently. He's got a solo album coming out, which would be good. Be good to hear.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this person and their website because you mentioned both in your book. Uh, if I didn't mention the Black Sabbath online website, which is black-sabbath.com. Joe
Yep.
Siegler is a friend of mine.
He
Unbelievable,
was, yeah, terrific.
unbelievably smart. His website, nothing short of amazing, and the Black Sabbath timeline he has on there, so time consuming for him. Yet it's a it's been a pleasure for us. He's been a great help.
Joe, it's interesting because when the internet started, there were tons of fan websites for different bands all over the place, and a lot of bands maybe only have one left now. In Joe, it's the best Black Sabbath website, really. I know there's an official Black Sabbath website, but it's not as good as Joe's.
No, not even close.
So the guy is a legend. There's a great one for Alice Cooper, the Sick Things one in the UK is like an equivalent of that, and these guys deserve all the credit because they're basically holding a fan base together. In my view, is what they do. It's somewhere
Yeah,
to go, which an official site never is. So
the
big respect to Joe. Yeah.
how can people find you online? What's the like your website?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's called Words on Music, one word, dot online.
Okay, I'll have that in the show notes also.
So what I will do is I will obviously do a link when you put yours up, and then I'll put it on Instagram, etc., and link to you. Um, I, I've been doing the books running. I never thought of having a website, but I've got lots of stuff on different bands and
Yeah,
things that I wanted to cover. Um, and it's been good fun doing that. It's been quite interesting to do that. So there'll be all sorts of different stuff, mostly with a rock metal background,
great.
but some other side stuff going on.
Do you have another book in the pipeline?
Do you know, nobody's asked me that question lately. So I'll tell you the truth. I've got two that I'm doing at the moment. One is Sparks in the 80s.
Oh,
I did Sparks in the 70s. They've largely been an American band with European, British members, but they were never very popular in America.
right.
Um, but during the 1980s, they kind of went back and spent most of the 80s in America doing quite well. It's very well.
Their documentary is fantastic.
Oh, you've seen that, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, when I did the Sparks in the 70s, I was getting all this fan mail and comments and messages from America mostly. And they said, "Oh, you must do the 80s era." So I'm working on that at the moment, and I'm also doing an entire book on Alice Cooper's Billion Dollar Babies. So I can just go right into the whole background of the album in enormous detail. It's my favorite album. And also what was going on in America at the time, what the cultural, social aspects are. And I wanted to do that. But the website's starting to take over a bit because you can do whatever you want. It's quite diverse. There's new bands, old classic albums, all sorts of things you can dabble into, and that's actually quite fun. So I'll still keep the books coming, hopefully. But that's what's coming up. Yeah. I don't think there'll be anything else on Black Sabbath or Dio that I would do.
Right.
No,
I'm
but
big
you never
into,
know.
I'm big into Alice Cooper, so
You are.
Oh yeah.
I've done 2 books on Alice. And I was very lucky because the first one, Alice Cooper in the 70s, I started during lockdown, which was a great time to do anything like that, because I would contacting Neil Smith, Michael Bruce, and Dennis Dunaway from the Cooper Group, and they all went, "Yeah, give us a call." It was like, and that is a hell of an experience, because I used to have their posters on my wall when I was a kid, and you have to remember to breathe because they're looking at you like you are me now, and you're thinking, "You're Dennis Dunaway, Michael Bruce." You're like my Beatles.
Yeah.
And they're just lovely guys, which is good.
Yeah,
thankfully.
absolutely. I've interviewed 2 former members of Alice's band, but not the original band, but
That's okay.
But Steve Hunter, and we talked a lot about Alice, and he's on Billion Dollar Babies, plays some solos on there, and
he does the pedal steel guitar.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Wow. Great Mellotron on that, by the way. And he does that terrific solo on Generation Landslide. Sick Things, he does the solo on.
I think he plays on the song Billion Dollar Babies, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He does. He's terrific. I mean, Steve Hunter's an incredible guitar player. So well done you for getting to chat to him, because that's not easy to do. And who else have you interviewed from Alice's solo?
Well, this guy was in the band in I think it was the 90s or maybe early 2000s, but Damon Johnson.
Oh, wow. Good one.
Yeah. I got him. I think they were thinking about, he had just put out a solo album, and they were thinking about putting Brother Cane back together, and then he just got the gig with Leonard Skinner. It was before Gary died, but he was doing a lot of shows with them then. So I think that was 22 maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. But is it musicians you mostly want?
I initially did all musicians, but I want to maybe, let's see. I think the last 7 have all been authors.
Authors?
Yeah. That's what I've done lately. And what I like about interviewing an author is you don't have to know all their background. Like when you interview a musician, sometimes you have to, especially like Steve Hunter or John Oates or somebody like that, where you need to know years of stuff. Here you just read a book. I read that 3 times because I enjoyed it so much. But you read the book, and if you know the book, which I know some people, you probably had this happen to you, will interview you, and you can tell they didn't read the book. But if you read the book, you can just have a great conversation.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good point.
I want to thank you for all your time today.
And it's been a pleasure.
This is a subject I never get tired of talking about.
No, and quite rightly so.
This has been great because I had all these questions, and no, but they all got addressed either by me asking them or you talking. It was perfect.
Good.
Absolutely perfect.
Well, thanks. You've been a lovely host as well. So thank you so much. And we're going to keep talking, Terry. Okay.
Okay. All right. I'll see you. Thanks.
Thank you, matey. Bye. Bye.
Black Sabbath, the Dio Years, is available anywhere good books are sold. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, be sure to give me a 5-star review. Or if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. They really help the channel. Also, be sure to go to tbpcpodcast.com and hit that PayPal button to donate. We'll see you next time.